Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, based on wherever you're joining us from. My name is Natasha. I'm a part of the Red Pen. I head MBA admission services at the Red Pen, and I'm really excited to speak to you today. While we're speaking about beyond borders and about building perspective on global MBA programs, keep adding your questions to the chat box, and I'll pick them up as we go along in this session. I'll really be keen to understand how members watching this particular session, or the audience for this session, let me know when you're planning to apply, and if there are questions on your mind around how you're thinking about the MBA program that you want to go for. Will love to understand that as well. Okay, so let's talk about beyond borders and why I feel very strongly about this topic. Okay, I think before we talk about what it means to go beyond borders, I really have a very fundamental question that I want to ask you. When you think about your MBA program, and when you think about your application and where you want to spend that time and energy applying to a business school, I think the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what is the best MBA that you're thinking about right now? And isn't really the one that is highly ranked on popular lists, or is not the school that is on everyone's lips right now. Now, every year I counsel students who are thinking about whether they should apply for an MBA, whether they should think about another degree at this point of their life. And the common question that everyone has is, how do I know whether the school that I'm thinking about is really the right school for me? And there's a lot that goes into that decision. It's highly personal, but it's also one of the most important decisions that applicants really feel the pressure of and the weight of at that point in their journey. And yes, there are a lot of American programs that would be instant recall, that would consistently feature on some of the best ranked lists. But you need to think about your MBA degree and how you're thinking about the success that you're going to gain post an MBA degree, more by how it's going to align with your sense of purpose. Does it really fit the plan that you want to build for yourself? And then, when you think about it with that lens, deciding which program you should take becomes part of a much bigger question in terms of what you want to do with your life. Yes, you can think about what you want to do with your life only in terms of the program that you want to apply to, but that is going to really limit the strength of the pitch that you're going to build for business school. So today, what we're going to talk about is really some of the thoughts that you would have, some of the myths that may be on your mind, and let's now focus on how you really need to develop an understanding of how a program best serves you, rather than only thinking of an MBA program in terms of its aspirational value. There are a lot of myths that you're going to come across when you start evaluating programs, or when you start talking to people. I think the first step is really when you start talking to people around you in terms of how you need to think about an MBA program. A lot of the schools that you would be aware of, or that will be suggested to you, will be programs in the US. And whenever you think about programs outside of the US, and typically these would be programs who like INSEAD or LBS, you'll start hearing a lot of chatter around why you should not think about programs that are outside of the US. And there are misconceptions. I've listed them out here, but these are also questions that applicants ask us, because they start wondering whether those degrees are going to really matter or have value when they think about a global career. They also will have this thought that their career opportunities might be limited. They may be limited because of the reach the school has, whether it will be impacted by regional considerations. And sometimes it could also be that they don't know the local language, or they don't know a language that is spoken in the region that they're thinking about. And there are answers to that, and we'll address that. But I think those are very scary thoughts. And there's also a thought process that, do I get the kind of faculty that's going to add value to what I'm really seeking for? If I'm looking at conceptual skills and how I need to enhance them, do I get someone who has enough research authority? Do I get someone who is a leader in the field? There's also a thought that alumni networks outside of US schools may not really be supportive, may not really be close knit. And if I'm thinking of access to, a group of people who could really be potential mentors or partners, will I get the value of access to individuals who really are, who are really going to be people I could look up to? So, I'd like to address some of these myths because, they're common enough that I feel it's worth talking about them right now. Yes, there are degrees that are respected globally outside of the US, that's self evident. There are a lot of schools in Europe as well as in Asia and Canada. And you may want to think about how these degrees are perceived in certain industries. So, for example, if you're thinking of technology, maybe you're thinking of schools in France now. If you're thinking of a career in consulting or in financial services, maybe the UK is where you want to think about, positioning yourself for the next 3 to 5 years. Are you thinking of a career in technology? If you are, then you'd be surprised that, outside of France, you also have opportunities, in Asia. So, there are opportunities, but it is a more nuanced question because then you're thinking about intention and you're thinking about a larger picture before you then work backwards and think about the school that you want to be a part of. Are career opportunities limited? Definitely not. Are career opportunities limited by language? Now, this is a slightly layered question, and I think the answer is as layered. I think programs that are outside of the US will offer you global opportunities. It is definitely not limited by regional constraints, but knowing a language that is commonly spoken in the region that you are planning your career in is definitely an advantage. But do you need that knowledge at the start of the program? You don't. But all schools that are outside of the US will have opportunities for you to learn the language. I remember meeting someone, from South America when last year when I was in Paris and, we were visiting HEC. I met an alum who told me that he was from Argentina. And one of the things that he was really passionate about was, being a part of the luxury industry in France. And to that end, he was someone who had spent most of his breaks and any extra time he had taking French classes. And that really boosted his career opportunities in an area that he was passionate about. So while there are global opportunities, there are also opportunities for you to expand on your knowledge of a language and then look at very regional considerations as well. And I think that is a great opportunity in disguise. Alumni networks, are they supportive? Yes. A lot of programs outside of the US place a lot of emphasis on having a truly international alumni cohort. They are very supportive and connected. So, for example, INSEAD does talk about the fact that their regional alumni chapters are extremely active, and they are connected by an app where if you are in a particular location, you can actually search for alums who are in the neighborhood, who are close by, and then you can set up meetings with them. And that's a great way to bring the community together. There's also a lot of emphasis on mentorship from the perspective of career opportunities. So, and I think this is something that we saw across business schools in Spain, in France when we visited. It's something that UK schools talk about very strongly. So it is something that should not limit your research into the business schools that you are thinking about. As we move forward, I think I would want to talk about how you need to think of evaluating the value of an MBA for you. And this is something that I tell anyone that I typically counsel, when they're with the Red Pen, that when you're thinking of how you want to look at or evaluate an MBA program, you need to look at alignment with your goals, but you need to be very specific about how you're thinking of a program and its benefits to you in the next 3 to 5 years, as well as more long term. It's important for you to look at 4 elements when you evaluate how an MBA program or a specific MBA program is going to serve your needs. And you accordingly, if you look at the 4 categories that I've mentioned, it will help you be far more specific about the information that you gather about the school and then look at its fit with your goal statement. My advice, first think of a goal statement, evaluate a very specific goal statement that's going to hold value for you over the next 3 to 5 years, and is very specific to include the sector that you want to be a part of, the companies where you envision yourself, the kind of teams that you want to be a part of, and also the work or the assignments that are really going to be, aspirational for you at this point in time. Now, when you have that kind of vision in mind, and then of course you also articulate a long-term vision, can be ambitious, but it needs to indicate, I think most importantly, it needs to indicate what will continue to be important to you over the next decade. And it's fine if that is slightly fuzzy at this point because you're just starting your research, but articulating that is going to help you land on elements that you do need to acquire from the business school that you choose to attend. Now, the first thing that you want to look at is academic inputs. A business program that you choose to attend, you will definitely look at its curriculum. You look at core courses, you'll look at electives, you'll start understanding which of those are going to really round out your perspective, which so far or thus far has been shaped more by your experiences rather than any kind of strategic or structured input. You then want to think about the faculty that you're going to interact with, the kind of research they're doing, the kind of opportunities you're going to have to benefit from their expertise and the research in the fields that they are involved in. And this, while it is common sense and it is typically at the top of everyone's list, understanding how that aligns with your goals is perhaps the connector that typically is missing in some of the initial drafts or some of the initial research you might do. You also want to understand experiential learning. You want to think about, whether there is an action learning focus, what are the kind of projects you're going to be exposed to, the kind of organizations you'd work with. And you'd also want to understand whether that is going to, how global is that experience really going to be? And how is it going to round out your understanding of business problems in a very different geography or a very different context? Because again, if you're investing in a global MBA, you want to think about how it's going to impact or how it's going to add value to the goal that you have in the next 3 to 5 years, which is very, very specific, right? You want to think about how you're going to immediately look at, building strategic or analytical structures to be able to tackle or work on projects in the future. So understanding this has more impact on your short-term goals, I would say. You then want to think about the industry connect you want. So beyond, of course, the academic experience, the industry connect that you form is extremely, is one of the key factors of why a school would matter to you. When you're thinking of industry connect, you do want to think about the kind of resources that the school offers in terms of maybe centers of excellence or specializations that are really going to be specific to the industry that you're thinking about in the future. You want to look at things like industry treks. So whether it is semesters, or that will be involved, where you'll be involved in projects or internships, or whether that's going to be treks or industry visits that are organized. These are resources that are building real world perspective and are critical if you want to look at how the school is going to benefit you. And again, this assumes more importance if you are thinking of a school outside of the US, if you're thinking of an international program in other geographies. You do want to understand how those industry treks are going to give you either a global perspective or B, a regional perspective into issues or enduring business opportunities or problems that could be very useful for the immediate future you're planning for yourself. Conferences and events are another important element because, these are experiences where you can, develop some key skills like organizing or connecting with industry leaders or other individuals that you really want to. And it's also a great opportunity for you to build out your network, for the future. You also want to think about the school's recruiting resources, and you want to think about the kind of relationships they have, the enduring relationships they have with employers or potential employers that you would put, a lot of emphasis on. Beyond the industry connect and academic inputs, which really will very closely align with your short-term goals, I think the other two resources align more with the long-term vision that you might have. And even if you don't have it immediately. It is going to start building as you have more conversations with individuals in the future. So number one, you want to think about the community you're going to be a part of for the in the near future, whether that is 15 months, 21 months, 18 months, 21 months, or even 24 months. But you want to think about how diverse that cohort is. Are you going to interact with individuals that are really going to build out a global perspective for you? You want to think about student clubs because they will be an important part of the network that you form in the future. And aligning with individuals who share the same interests will give you an added dimension or an added layer of nuance in how you think about, problems or opportunities in the future. Professional associations, you also want to think about how the community is going to facilitate a more structured entry for you into specific, whether those are associations or whether those are, other clubs that are going to give you the entry point that you want for the professional interests that you have. And you also want to think about the collaborative culture. Now, while a lot of schools are going to talk about the close knit community that they have, understanding what that really translates into, what a collaborative culture translates to, how does a school structure it or create structures or frameworks that will enable those bonds to thrive, is an important part of how you want to think about the involvement of that community and the support of that community for your goals in the next 10 years. That brings me to one of the most important parts, which is really the network that you will have access to. When you're evaluating the value of the network and the personal conversations or the one-on-one conversations you have either with ADCOM members or with student ambassadors are really an important way for you to gauge this. You want to think about the kind of connect that you're going to form in the target industry or geography that you aim to be a part of. You do need to think about the involvement of regional chapters of that school. And based on where you are located, you will want to ask maybe more specific questions of how that is going to further your career. You do want to think about mentorship opportunities. I remember schools like INSEAD, for example, or HEC, or even ESA have mentorship programs where there are structured ways for alumni to be invested in and support current students, whether that is in terms of perspective or in terms of opportunity. So you really want to think about how mentorship is going to translate into something actionable for you. And you want to think about collaboration and partners. You want to think about how, if you have an entrepreneurship goal or if you're thinking about it in the future, you want to think about how that network is going to foster your search for people who really share your vision or the creativity that you want, or perhaps they fill a gap or a technical or perhaps a business gap that you really would want. And the reason I've gone into so much detail over here is these elements will need to inform how you're evaluating a program rather than looking at a ranking list and then assuming that a school that is ranked X versus Y is really a better school or a worse school for you to go to, because it isn't as simple as that. And it's not that a ranking translates into a drastically or a dramatically better experience or a worse experience. What you gain from any MBA program is really going to be dependent on what you seek to gain from it, and what you seek to gain or how you look at achieving your goals needs to be based on these 4 pillars. When you look at global opportunities, there's just so much to choose from, right? You're looking at schools in Canada, whether it's Rotman, whether it's Ivy, Schulich, Sauder. If you're looking at Europe, then there's really a lot of great schools in France, in Spain, in the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Germany. And these are great opportunities for you to explore what Europe really has to offer you. If you're thinking of the UK and you have finance, consulting, entrepreneurship, or even tech on your mind, then there's LBS, there's Cambridge, there's Oxford Side, there's Imperial College, there's just so many again. Asia gives you a lot of nuance because where you are in Asia will really determine the kind of experience or the kind of opportunities you're exposed to. So whether it's China, Hong Kong, mainland China, Hong Kong, Singapore, or India, all the schools that I've mentioned here are great options for you to really think about what Asia is going to translate to in the future and how you want to be a part of it. There are campuses, international campuses in the Middle East, and I think a great opportunity to think about is a campus, the Abu Dhabi campus for NYU Stern School of Business. If you're thinking of Australia, there's Melbourne Business School as well. I know there are a lot more in terms of business schools. The ones I've mentioned over here are typically the schools where if you have if you want a great starting point for your research, these would be the schools that I would strongly recommend you look at. And all of them accept the GMAT. Maybe the GMAT and GRE, while both might be accepted globally, but I would say that you should inquire whether the GMAT is really what you want to give these schools, but they all accept standardized tests. And these, again, are great opportunities outside of the US. There are other schools in India as well as in Asia and the UK. There's a tremendous number of schools, and Australia. But I think with Australia, it might be a very specific goal. If you're thinking of going to Australia for a business education, you might be looking at slightly more specific career opportunities. But yeah, I think global opportunities exist across all the schools that are on this list. I do also want to just reiterate that if you have questions, now is a good time to start putting it in the chat, because we can start picking up questions very soon. And I'm sure that if you're starting your journey this year, there's a good chance that you're already thinking about what you should be doing and whether you should be hedging your bets across schools globally. So I think now is a good time for us to start thinking about how you want to plan your future and how you want to plan the next 6 months, honestly. It's a good idea to have a strategy that encompasses rounds 1 and 2, and maybe not think of only a singular round this year. So let's start talking about it so you can add your questions to the chat. Okay. I think when you think about distinct advantages that you need to keep in mind when you're having your conversations is really about the kind of experience you want to have. And one of the major advantages with schools in other geographies is just the degree of international experience you're going to have, not only in terms of the geography that you will be a part of, but also because you're going to have a truly international cohort. Schools, across the world will have, I can start seeing questions come in, so I'll start addressing them in a minute. So, they will offer you a very diverse student cohort. You can expect, up to about 80 to 90% of your class to be international, which is a great perspective for you to build, to start really rounding out how you think about the world. Another important consideration is really cost efficiency, especially not only in terms of tuition costs, but also in terms of living costs. And this again brings me to the second part of this, which is the program duration and how long you can expect to be on campus. Now, the options that you would have with a lot of the programs across the US as well as Asia, Canada as well, is really opportunities to choose from programs that don't necessarily follow the two-year standard. And this means that you're returning to the workforce faster. So your ROI, the opportunities for you to really round out or think about a more positive ROI are greater. You're also in a position to really cram in the academic part of your experience over either a 15 or an 18 or a 21-month duration. Some programs might have opportunities for you to adjust or to choose an entry point that gives you access to a shorter program duration. You also want to think about the advantages in terms of your exposure to opportunities globally, as well as very specifically regionally. If you're planning to build a future in a specific geography, a good idea is for you to start thinking about an MBA in that geography. And especially if you're thinking of long-term goals or long-term opportunities in areas like Canada or the UK, or even, like I mentioned earlier, Australia, you want to think about a program that is going to give you a more, strategic entry point into those markets. Conversely, if you're thinking of a global career, you will also realize as you as you start doing your research, that these are programs that are also going to provide you with a lot of global opportunities, not just in the markets that they exist in. So it's a great way to have those options available at the same time. Another important thing that doesn't really come up in initial conversations, but it emerges to be one of the more important factors that people realize when they go to business school, is really the average class profile or the student profile that you're going to interact with. A lot of the schools globally do prefer having students that are slightly more established in careers, and there are many things, right? It's a circle. So such students will also be attracted to programs that are shorter in duration, would also be thinking about ROI far more consciously and intentionally. So you start looking at, or you start seeing a student profile where the average age or the average PMBA years of work ex would be about 5 to 6 years, which means that perspectives in classrooms and in discussions will be very different. You'd get an opportunity to learn from individuals who have really been through the grind and who would know or would have insights that would be really deeper. So it's a good way for you to really round out how you're thinking of the value of the MBA, how you're thinking of the value of the projects you're doing, as well as the value that you're going to get from every discussion that you participate in. With that, I do want to come to questions, because I think a lot of how you would be thinking about an MBA at this point would be determined by what you're hearing in terms of developments, whether those are socio-political, whether those are driven by how you're thinking of your career in your current geography over the next 3 to 5 years. So it's important to understand that, at this point, it's perhaps important more than ever to think about a plan that works for you and that is really shaped by personal goals in a far more meaningful manner. Yes, you will get a great education at any of the globally ranked universities, but how you want to really think about it now needs to be shaped by where you see yourself in the next 3 to 5 years, what geographies you want to station yourself in, and how you're thinking of long-term stability, as well as the longevity of the career that you want to be in. I do see a question that's come in right now, so I'm going to take a pause and answer it. How do I balance my GMAT and applications if I am starting right now? Sagar, thanks for that question. I think it's a great question to ask if you're at a very initial stage of your journey. I think one of the things that I always tell clients that I work with is balancing your GMAT and applications needs to be something where you really need to add structure to the project plan that you want to establish for it. Yes, studying for the GMAT is not necessarily only an academic experience, but you want to make time for mock tests, you want to make time for going over error logs and understanding and refining your strategy. However, your applications are far more than just writing an essay or refining your resume and putting it together. A lot of the time that you're going to spend at this point in developing your application is really going to hark back to conversations that you want to have with individuals on campus. And that's really what the next month, 2 months are going to be about. And you're going to have to think about your application in terms of how much time can you devote to building application components every week. My suggestion is always think about devoting anywhere between an hour to 2 hours every day towards some component of your application. If you think about your college or your MBA applications from 4 components, from the perspective of 4 components, you have your resume, you have your letters of recommendation, you have subjective questions on your application form, and you have your essays. So at this point in time, I would say that you could think about dividing your time between your resume as well as building out LOR pointers, and starting to reach out to and build connections with student ambassadors and contacts that you have on campus. This does take time, because a lot of times what we don't realize is these are individuals who might be in the middle of internships, might be studying for something, that they're facing, an exam or something else. So it does take time to initially build those contacts. So starting now, I would say that if you have an hour every day, then you can work a little bit on your resume. You can start thinking about your LOR pointers, and you need to start devoting some time to going over websites, LinkedIn profiles, sending out emails, sending out connection requests. And if you start getting connections, then you need to devote time consistently to building out those connections and having an invested network. At a later point in time, maybe in the months of like the second half of July, you're going to start writing your essays, and that does take time. It is an iterative process. So having that daily schedule would mean that you don't feel overwhelmed by one component over the other. And it also means that you can balance between the time that you want to devote to test taking or test preparation and, working on individual components. With test prep, you may also have to budget for not just a single attempt for a test, but you also want to budget for about, I would say, always a buffer of like an additional test attempt. So doing this will just ensure that you're not overwhelmed at any point in time. So Sagar, I hope I've answered your question, and I hope it helps anyone else who's thinking about test prep at this point in time. I think one of the interesting things that I really like about looking at a lot of global MBA applications is the way they approach understanding their applicants. And it's very different from the way we're used to thinking about essays for US business programs. What I do see is there's a lot more real estate to provide schools with a comprehensive picture of who you are. And you would see that essays for most global programs would range, you'd not just have like one or two essays, but essays could range between as little as maybe two essays to as many as about 6 to 7 essays. And they really look to understand your strengths, your weaknesses, how you view success and failure, and also how you think about certain key moments in your life. Asking that in the form of an essay as opposed to an interview question would just mean that you have a lot more time to articulate, and it helps you build on that conversation during an interview, because you're not then answering those questions in an interview. You're building on those examples and then talking about more meaningful insights that you would have gained and how it impacts the future. So it's really interesting. So I just find it amazing how answering multiple questions that build out on your professional understanding or professional knowledge, as well as who you are and how you view certain key moments in your life, can really come together to provide a picture of you that is extremely layered and is also vulnerable. So I think that is something that I really enjoy. If anyone has any questions around how they want to think about, just asking relevant questions to the school, I think now is a good time to ask me that. My advice is that when you're having conversations, regardless of the school that you're thinking of applying to, you want to think about understanding the audience or understanding the person that you're going to be connecting with. The kind of questions that you would ask someone from an admissions committee would be very different from the kind of questions that you ask a current student, which would also be very different from the questions that you want to ask an alumni. Primarily, if you're talking to someone who is on campus right now, a student, you want to understand their experience. So you want to understand elements that would help you round out information around what it means to be a part of the community, the kind of supportive culture that the school has. And you want to understand how you're going to be living. What is your day going to look like when you are a student on campus? And understanding that would help you ask more meaningful questions around experiences that matter or that were truly transformational for the person that you're speaking with. If you're talking to someone from AdCom, you want to focus on the first few elements that I spoke about, which are in terms of resources, networks, and the way the school will help you round out your understanding of a particular sector, or even your interactions with individuals in a particular sector. Understanding the resources and the connections from someone who is intentionally planning for the future or putting cohorts together will again build out your understanding of what it means to be on campus, but with a very different view. And if you're talking to alumni, what you want to understand are connections that you would continue to nurture after after you join the professional world post your program. So you want to again talk to them about the enduring connections, how they are sustained, and what is the value of really being a part of the network, the alumni network of that particular school. Understanding elements across these three categories of individuals, students, alumni, and adcom/faculty, will just mean that you're able to think about strengthening your pitch more holistically. I see another question. Planning to apply to CBS Denmark, hoping to get maximum scholarships. What are a few things I can consider for increasing my chance to get in and the scholarships? So, Kirti, that's a great question. All the best with your application. But I think if you're thinking of strengthening your chances of landing a scholarship, you really need to be very careful in the kind of scholarships you're thinking of applying to. If you are intentionally required to submit essays. And if you want, I feel what you should do at this point is indulge in a little bit of reflection that would bring out the following elements, which would strengthen your pitch for scholarships. Number one, you need to think about advocacy. How are you an advocate for others at this point? So apart from your lived experiences where you have, of course, intentionally charted a course for yourself, you need to think about the contributions that you've made to other communities or individuals. So whether those are women in business, whether those are underserved minorities, think about times when you've actually advocated for others. And I would say not just in the professional world, but also, from times from maybe high school or undergraduate years. But think about times where you have supported a cause, you have advocated for others, and where has that landed you? What is the impact that you can quantify from everything that you have done thus far? Understanding and articulating that at an early stage. And for a lot of us, sometimes we don't really draw those connections, and it takes a little time to really bring out how we've created impact across different communities or groups or people. So I would say start thinking about it now. You'd be surprised. Maybe you have done a lot, but articulating it will also help you understand how you want to quantify impact. That is important at this stage. So I hope I've helped you. Great. Thanks a lot, Kirti. It's a pleasure to help. And I think always whenever applying for or being intentional about scholarships, you need to understand that a scholarship is something that is not just your need, but also because you want to show the school, or that apart from your lived experiences, you are someone who thinks about investing in others, whether those are, whether that investment is, like I mentioned, to Kirti, advocacy, or you want to think about it in terms of creativity, or whether you want to think about it in terms of innovation, or what you have done or thought differently at different points in time, which has impacted others. Kirti, yes, even though those happened a long time ago, that's a starting point, honestly. I would say that think about it from long time ago, because what you need to build is a story that demonstrates consistency. And an example would be, suppose I was a part of a school project where I helped maybe local artisans, sell their craft online. But since school, I have not done anything in that area. It would be difficult for you to then demonstrate that you are someone who the school should invest in, because you are going to continue to do that in the future. Merely asserting to a school that I will do this, or I will use my MBA and my skills for good, is not necessarily the strongest argument. But what you can do is, if you're able to demonstrate consistency in how you think about the impact of your actions on the world, and you have intentionally done something about it, that is the pattern of behavior that they're really looking for you to articulate. So anywhere where you need to talk about your involvement in any cause or in any activity, you need to think about prioritizing consistency rather than the impact of a particular activity. There are people who will come to me and ask me whether, will helping the underprivileged be considered more valuable than helping someone cross the road. And it's really not that simple. It's not the how valuable one perceived activity is to be, but it's about how consistently you continue to involve yourself. So that's the enduring message. And that's what you need to demonstrate to schools. So I hope I've answered your question, Kirti, to a greater degree. But yeah, if there are any other questions, I think let me know. This is the time to really clarify. We're about now 2 months from most major deadlines. And at this point in time, my advice would be start thinking about planning your time. Great. So start thinking about planning your time. I have done a couple of webinars on how you need to plan for the 2 months before submission dates. Those are available on the Red Pen MBA's YouTube channel. You can check those out. We do a lot of sessions around planning for applications. And I think now is the right time for anyone who's thinking about round one to look at them. If you reach out to, I think now's a good time as any to mention that I have put our contact details on the screen. There is a mobile number, and there is also our website, and there is also an email address. So thanks GMAT Club for placing that on the screen. But you can reach out to us. We're counseling applicants at the moment. We are looking at working with applicants, and should you reach out to us, we can understand what you are specifically looking for from an MBA experience and how we can help you get there. So I think we have quite a few questions. I think if you are right now thinking about applying for an MBA, another piece of advice I would have is really think about dream, target, and safety schools from a global perspective. I would say that in round one, you should think about a strategy that encompasses various geographies, and think about hedging your bets across dream, target, and safety, and across geographies. That would be a good way to go. And then look at building out your round two strategy on the basis of the outcomes that you see in round one, because you will then maybe have a couple of either geographies or schools that you hold in reserve. And it's a good way for you to then think about phase two of your plan. If you're giving your GMAT or GRE at this stage, which is a distinct possibility, I would say that try and see whether you can have an attempt at the test of your choice. Look at whether you can have that scheduled for latest by the end of July. If you're moving your test attempt to August, it might interfere with the kind of consistent planning that I mentioned that you should be doing. So yeah, I would say that just start rounding out test prep and start thinking about when that final date is going to be. There are those among us who find that having a test date in mind and then working backwards from there sometimes helps to plan better. If you are one of those, then start thinking about a test date in the end of July and work from there. So I don't see any questions on the screen right now. So I think, if you do think of questions after you watch this webinar, then you can reach out to us, like I mentioned. And I think we can then look at something which is a conversation that's more personalized to your particular needs and how you're thinking of this application year, whether round one or round two, or in terms of the geographies that you are thinking of applying to. So with that, I think, yes, it's been a pleasure speaking to the GMAT Club audience, as always. And yes, I look forward to speaking to anyone who chooses to reach out to us directly. Thank you very much.